Tonight, state growth under fire for using artificial intelligence to assess a controversial hotel project. Hello, I'm Guy Stayner. This is ABC News. Also tonight, the delayed Spirit of Tasmania program putting pressure on local businesses. King Charles and Queen Camilla greeted with cheers and jeers in Canberra. And Qantas facing a multi-million-dollar compensation bill over illegal sackings. It's been revealed the Tasmanian government partially relied on artificial intelligence to grant major project status to a contentious luxury hotel proposed for Hobart. The Greens say it's an alarming use of the new technology, while the local council is considering a new legal challenge against the project.
Shambroad's $65 million proposal for a luxury hotel at Kangaroo Bay on Hobart's eastern shore was granted major project status by the Planning Minister last week.
In the submission, it outlines 100 full-time equivalent jobs in construction and 443 full-time equivalent jobs across the southern region.
But those job numbers are now under scrutiny after documents tabled in Tasmania's Parliament showed the Department of Treasury had initially noted that the veracity of these estimates cannot be tested. In response, the State Planning Office revealed it had run the numbers past Microsoft's AI assistant Copilot and found Shambroad's estimates were reasonable.
This is an alarming use of a new technology. School teachers wouldn't accept this kind of use of artificial intelligence for homework, and it certainly shouldn't be something that the government is using.
Copilot bases its responses on information found on the internet, and even Microsoft warns that while its answers might sound convincing, they're sometimes incomplete and inaccurate. But the Tasmanian government is defending its use.
It's my understanding and my advice is it's not unusual in terms of the assessment process.
Major project status means the hotel proposal will now be assessed by a panel set up by the Planning Commission rather than the Clarence City Council.
This sort of finding calls into question the validity of the whole report. Just because you can't disprove something doesn't make it correct.
The council is already taking court action to try and buy back the land from the developer, and it's now seeking legal advice about whether it can challenge the government's major project declaration. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
Ongoing delays to the rollout of new Spirit of Tasmania vessels is placing pressure on small businesses across the state. Some rely on being able to move larger vehicles, but are finding there simply isn't space on the current smaller ships. But there are hopes firmer timeframes for the project could be known within days.
Melissa Cunningham started her business 4 years ago, transporting dogs between Tasmania and the mainland.
Our business solely relies on the Spirit of Tasmania.
For her business to remain viable, she needs to be able to book a space on the ferries for a large van, but this is becoming increasingly difficult.
We've got a beg to get on. We're on wait lists, which doesn't work when people want to know they want to move dogs. A lot of the time they only know within a week that they want to move the dogs, and we just can't get the extra vehicle space on the boat.
Melissa expected that the new, larger Spirit of Tasmania vessels would be in service by now. The delays in the rollout have been costly.
We drew the line in the sand. If they weren't here by this October school holidays, we couldn't go on.
This is just one of many stories that the ABC has been told about delays in booking vehicles on the current Spirit vessels. Some are reporting that the earliest large vehicle bookings aren't available until mid-next year, and there's still no date for when the new, larger ships will actually be able to start operating at full capacity.
I think everybody wants some timeframes around this project. They're already 5 years late. They're $500 million over budget, and we still don't know when they're going to arrive.
But that could be known on Thursday when the government responds to a report on using a temporary berth at Devonport and how to house the new ships while the permanent berth is built.
We have received advice from the experts. It's very extensive and comprehensive. We'll be responding to that, and the Premier will be making that very clear later this week.
There'll also be a new minister at the helm, former Sorell Mayor Kerry Vincent, soon to be Infrastructure Minister.
Kerry Vincent has common sense. He knows how to get things done. He works hard and he's the man to get that job done.
But pressure remains on the two government businesses central to the bungled rollout, Tasports and TT Line. TT Line claiming the port operator delayed access to important areas for 11 months.
I'm humbly and firmly of the view that the steps taken by Tasports were appropriate. But as I said, I won't get into the finger pointing.
Businesses that rely on the Spirit just want everyone involved to play nice. Adam Holmes, ABC News.
Israel has carried out multiple strikes on Lebanon's capital after announcing it would target Hezbollah's financial operations. Shortly after the warning, explosions rocked Beirut. The Israeli Air Force hit at least 10 sites across the city, as well as targets in the Bekaa Valley in the east and near the border in the south. Meanwhile, in Gaza, hopes of a ceasefire are dwindling after an Israeli strike left 87 people dead or missing. Middle East correspondent Matthew Doran begins tonight's report on the events in Lebanon.
Explosions at the edge of Beirut's international airport, lighting a night sky blanketed in smoke.
We will be attacking a large number of targets in the next few hours and more targets later tonight.
The target, Al-Qad al-Hassan, a sanctioned non-profit the US says the Hezbollah militant group uses to manage its money. Also used by civilians, it has more than a dozen branches in the densely populated capital. It's a second straight day of strikes inside Beirut. Here, the IDF hitting what it says was a Hezbollah intelligence centre and weapons facility, killing 3 of the group's commanders.
The US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says Washington wants Israel to scale back its strikes on its northern neighbour, particularly in and around Beirut, adding that the number of civilian casualties is simply far too high. These latest strikes suggest that plea from Israel's strongest ally have gone unheard.
All the while in Gaza, Israel's offensive in the north continues. The streets of Beit Lahia coated in ghostly grey, the dust of buildings once homes, now piles of rubble.
We were asleep around midnight when it suddenly felt like an earthquake hit the area.
Dozens killed by an Israeli strike in the northern Gaza city.
All those who were martyred here are children, women and displaced people who fled from other areas due to heavy strikes, seeking shelter in what they believed to be a safer place.
Children cowering in hospitals after what they've endured. The Israeli military accused Hamas of exaggerating the death toll and insisted the strike used precise munitions against a Hamas target. The killing of the group's leader, Yahya Sinwar, doing little to slow the relentless barrage in Gaza. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Jerusalem.
A parliamentary reception for King Charles and Queen Camilla in Canberra was shaken by protests today, with Victorian Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe hurling insults and accusations at the monarch before being escorted out. It disrupted an otherwise carefully coordinated day in the nation's capital, where thousands of well-wishers gathered for a chance to meet the royal couple. Stephanie Dalzell has more.
They died for king and country. And now the king honouring them. King Charles and Queen Camilla at the War Memorial in Canberra, starting a day of royal engagements in the capital. Outside, more than 4,000 people waited hours for a glimpse of the pair. Many enamoured.
God save the king.
Some, like 9-year-old alpaca Hefner, less so.
He's met a few famous people over his times.
On the forecourt of Parliament House, a more enthusiastic greeting. 21 shots, salutes, and handshakes, with crowds camping out to be part of history. Prime Ministers past and present were inside the People's House for a parliamentary reception. As tributes were paid,
you have stood with us proudly in good times.
And gratefully received.
In my many visits to Australia, I have witnessed the courage and hope that have guided the nation's long and sometimes difficult journey towards reconciliation.
The extent of that highlighted just moments later. Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe escorted out of the Great Hall. MPs later condemned the interruption, which didn't mar the sense of occasion for those who'd gathered.
Is a head of state, no matter what people say.
I thanked her for coming all this way. I gave her a tea towel.
King Charles is only the second reigning monarch and the first ever king to visit Parliament House, following in the footsteps of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth, who opened this very building in 1988. King Charles then held private one-on-one sessions with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and opposition leader Peter Dutton, before heading to the CSIRO and observing a simulated bushfire, the real version of which have dominated Australian summers. The climate-conscious king seeking to advance the environmental cause across his 16 visits to Australia.
There we go. Little pat.
Laying down more roots for future generations.
If the stomach doesn't get too hot.
Stephanie Dalzell, ABC News, Canberra.
Lawyers say Qantas is facing a compensation bill of hundreds of millions of dollars for illegally sacking workers in the middle of pay negotiations. 1,700 ground crew, including baggage handlers and cleaners, will receive various payouts after being let go during the pandemic.
Woo! What a win! It was a day that these Qantas workers had been fighting for 4 years. Compensation for being illegally sacked when the airline outsourced their roles as they were preparing to strike.
I can put it behind me now, and it can pay bills that I didn't anticipate.
I expected to be there till I retired, and when this happened, it was an absolute shock.
1,700 SAC ground crew will now receive payouts for what they went through, ranging from $30,000 to $100,000 each.
Marriages have broken down as a result of this. People have lost houses. People have had distress, have had mental illnesses.
Workers will also be compensated for 1 year of lost work after the court found the airline would have legally outsourced their roles in 2021.
This is the spirit of Australia. You dig in when it gets tough and you don't give up. And here we are today having a massive victory.
Altogether, the airline is facing a big bill.
It'll probably end up somewhere between, say, $300 and $350 million in compensation.
While this might sound like a lot, this lawyer says that the company still saved cash by outsourcing the roles.
Well, I think what they've done was the right decision financially because it will have saved them money.
The airline had set aside $70 million for this legal battle, but now it has to go away and figure out the final bill. It says it'll be working with the union through a mediation process, and once again, it's apologised to its sacked workers. The airline is also facing a fine, which will be decided at a later date. Amelia Terzon, ABC News.
The US presidential election is now just weeks away, and so both candidates have been out campaigning for votes in key battleground states.
Happy birthday to you.
Kamala Harris was serenaded by Stevie Wonder as she marked her 60th birthday at 2 church services outside of Atlanta. The Democratic nominee will need strong results in the majority black cities of Detroit and Atlanta to repeat President Biden's 2020 wins in Michigan and Georgia. In suburban Philadelphia, Donald Trump swapped his suit for an apron and learned how to cook fries at McDonald's. Thousands of people gathered outside to watch the Republican nominee serve drive-through customers.
This is fun. I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again. Thank you.
Australia is planning to dramatically lower what's considered safe levels of PFAS in drinking water. The so-called forever chemicals have been linked to cancer and take thousands of years to break down.
They're in our clothes, cooking products and makeup.
PFAS chemicals have even made it into drinking water. Now health authorities are trying to limit that.
Our goal is to produce the highest quality evidence-based guidelines that will enable the states and the water suppliers to supply safe, clean water.
A growing body of research is linking long-term PFAS exposure to cancer and thyroid issues.
Every day of your life, 2 litres of water per day.
The proposed limits follow a crackdown in the US. Under the guidelines, the safe levels of 4 PFAS chemicals would be slashed, but PFOA, recently declared carcinogenic by the World Health Organization, would still be 50 times higher than America's limit. The forever chemicals have been used across the country, including in firefighting foam. But most drinking water has never been tested for PFAS, so the true extent of the problem remains unknown. However, recent samples taken in Sydney detected some of the chemicals at several water filtration plants.
Drinking water remains safe if it complies with the current guideline.
Authorities say the draft guidelines could mean one supply in the Blue Mountains would not be compliant, and there would likely be more.
I think there will be lots of communities that are out of compliance with that, and we will need to put in solutions.
Technology to remove the chemicals is costly.
The customer bills would increase to reflect the additional costs.
There are legal options available to us. We do want to make sure that the cost to the community of pollution is borne by the polluter.
The proposal's open for feedback and will be finalised by April next year. The onus then falls on state and territory governments to enforce any new standards. Xanthi Gregory, ABC News, Sydney.
Incoming Health Minister Jackie Petrusma says working in the health system for more than 2 decades will help her handle the challenging portfolio. Ms Petrusma will be sworn in as Health Minister on Wednesday, taking over from Deputy Premier Guy Barnett, who will become the state's new Treasurer. The Franklin MP spent about 26 years working in the health system, including as a nurse in various hospitals around the state and in the Federal Department of Health and Ageing. She first entered State Parliament in 2010. Ms Petrusma says she's willing to consider innovative approaches to solving problems in the health system.
It's just about looking at out-of-the-box solutions so that we can continue to decrease the pressures in our hospital system, of course increase recruitment of our healthcare staff, but also improve our facilities.
Drivers in Australia's 3 biggest cities are painfully aware of the cost of using toll roads. Now, a leading industry figure is calling for a shake-up of how those charges are set. Former Transurban Director Tony Shepherd has told Four Corners toll companies should not get automatic price increases above inflation on new roads.
Edwina Hyler used to travel to work on Sydney's toll roads, but when the amount she was paying each week hit $150 in December last year, she quit her job and found a new one closer to home and away from the tolls.
It just wasn't, feasible anymore to pay that kind of money in tolls just to get to work. Like, I'd have to work a day just to pay tolls.
It's a feeling familiar to drivers in Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, where toll prices have surged during the cost of living crisis. That's because they're pegged to inflation, and so Transurban earned a record $3.5 billion in revenue last financial year, operating 18 of Australia's 22 toll roads.
Their business is not there for the public good, it's there to make money.
Even in times of low inflation, most of its tolls are guaranteed to rise by 4% a year. A giant of the industry and former Transurban director Tony Shepherd says that deal should be off the table for future toll roads.
Well, I think in new projects, I think we can eliminate it. Now, we put it in originally because the risks were just so enormous, and that was what we needed to get people to be prepared to invest.
Transurban declined an interview and did not respond to questions, but in a statement said,
"Toll prices in Australia and how much they rise have always been determined by state or local governments, as have the charges associated with toll notices and late payments."
The New South Wales government has promised to slash toll prices in Sydney and is now negotiating a new tolling model with Transurban.
If we don't reform tolls,
Sydney will become a more congested place to live. It'll be less productive than it should be. It'll have a real impact on people's lives, particularly in Sydney's outer suburbs.
Since Edwina Hyland changed jobs, the state government's introduced a 2-year $60 per week cap on tolls. But when it ends, drivers like her may be back to paying full price. Pat McGrath, ABC News.
Remote New South Wales communities suffering from power outages are calling for more help from the state and federal governments. Broken Hill has been disconnected from the grid for days following wild winds.
The race is on to construct temporary replacements for these transmission towers knocked over during last week's huge storm. Until then, Broken Hill and much of the Far West is relying on a single diesel-powered generator, forcing local businesses to manage their power consumption.
We had to cancel the Sunday evening shows and then now we're closed until the pylons are replaced and the normal electricity generation is back online.
The mines have ceased production since the storm hit and workers won't return until power from the grid is restored. Miners have the option of using their annual leave or taking leave without pay.
It's a crazy situation to think that people are going to be impacted, with not having any money coming in each fortnight. It's going to hurt a lot of people, yeah.
The New South Wales government has now declared the incident a natural disaster, following pressure from Broken Hill's mayor and the Nationals.
What it will allow is government to compensate and give money back to the people. Also, increase the amount of services.
The Perillia mine is closed. There's 500 workers there being impacted. It's costing the mine $250,000 each and every day, and people are not quite sure what's happening.
The situation has been made worse by the lack of a second functioning generator, with Transgrid confirming that generator number 2 has been out of service since September, with it needing more work to get it back up and running again.
When you've got one connector in and one connector out in one of the most isolated cities, not just in Australia but in the entire world, you need to make sure that you've got backup generation.
The temporary towers aren't expected to be in place for at least another 2 weeks, leaving many here in the dark. Kokahala Connor, ABC News.
Former federal Labor politician and Glenorchy City Councillor Harry Quick has been remembered by his colleagues for his sharp mind and dedication to public service. Mr Quick was elected to the House of Representatives in 1993, serving in the southern Tasmanian seat of Franklin until his retirement in 2007. He was often described as a maverick and crossed the floor in 2005 to vote against anti-terrorism legislation. In 2014, he was elected to the Glenorchy City Council as councillor and deputy mayor, serving for 4 years. He was re-elected in 2022. He died in Adelaide on the weekend. He was 83. Soaring gold and silver prices have helped push the local share market and the Aussie dollar higher today. Here's Alan Kohler.
Global uncertainty, both in the Middle East and the US election, has sent investors rushing into precious metals, the traditional safe havens. And that sent gold up 37% in 12 months to a record high, and silver up 45% to a 12-year high. And analysts are predicting that this run for both gold and silver has further to go. Silver jumped a huge 6.3% over the weekend, and palladium 3.7%, while oil fell 2.5%. Now, part of the reason for the run is anticipation that China will eventually announce some decent stimulus for its ailing economy any day now, which is pushing all commodities up and leading to gains by mining stocks on the market, and they underpinned a solid gain on the ASX today. But 2 stocks were dumped for similar reasons. WiseTech Global and Mineral Resources are both dealing with messy scandals involving their founders and CEOs, Richard White and Chris Ellison respectively. Ellison is accused of tax evasion, and the WiseTech board has been in crisis meetings all weekend dealing with allegations about Richard White's sex life. Investors looked at their watches, made excuses and left both companies today, although WiseTech is still well up for the year, as the chart shows. The US market is in suspended animation awaiting November the 5th, and the stakes are high. American share prices have outperformed all others for 15 years for the simple reason that American companies have captured all of the earnings per share growth in the world since the GFC. It's quite staggering. And the Australian dollar stayed above 67 US cents, 100 yen and $1.10 Kiwi. And that's finance.
It feels like the season's only just begun, but with AFLW finals around the corner, there's been mixed reactions to the league's trial of a condensed fixture. After squeezing 11 games into a 10-week home and away season, the players say something needs to give.
After a whirlwind 8 weeks, the AFLW finals picture is becoming clearer.
Not wanting to look too far ahead, but also knowing, we do need to keep winning.
Having won 4 in a row, Melbourne is one of the teams on the cusp of the top 8. The Demons will need to overcome an equally strong Hawthorn, which remains in contention for the minor premiership.
We've had a lot of success and a lot of change this year as well, and I think that it's about maintaining our form, not looking too far ahead, just taking it week by week.
Thursday's battle between the two sides will be the opening game of the competition's Indigenous round, capping off a controversial condensed home and away season with the 18 teams each playing 11 games across 10 weeks.
I think that there's general consensus that the condensed fixture is probably not something that we'd like to continue with. It just puts a lot of strain on the players and on the clubs themselves.
The league has a guaranteed minimum of 12 matches per team next season and is looking at bringing the season forward to an earlier start to alleviate the fixture crunch.
And hopefully we've learned from this year from a time slot point of view from broadcasting, we can take those learnings forward, but supportive of playing as much football as possible.
It's obviously been a bit of a tough period, the condensed fixture with concussion and injury. We've obviously seen key players go out and find it hard to get up. But I think the overarching philosophy is we want to be playing more footy.
There'll be more footy in more places this weekend, with Darwin and Cairns hosting matches on the first week of the Indigenous round. Fraser Fife, ABC News, Melbourne.
New Zealand is celebrating its first Women's T20 World Cup triumph after defeating South Africa by 32 runs in the final in Dubai. Player of the tournament, Amelia Kerr, top scored with 43 as the White Ferns made 5 for 158. Kerr also took 3 wickets as South Africa was restricted to 9 for 126. It was a remarkable turnaround for New Zealand, who came into the tournament on a 10-game losing streak. Charles Leclerc has won the US Formula One Grand Prix ahead of his Ferrari teammate Carlos Sainz. It was the third victory of the year for the 27-year-old from Monaco. Lando Norris had finished third but received a 5-second penalty for passing Max Verstappen off the track. Verstappen was elevated to third position ahead of Norris and extended his championship lead over the Englishman to 57 points. Australian Oscar Piastri finished fifth.
It's just how it is. It's quite clear in the ruling you can't overtake outside the white line. Yeah, there's not more to say. I mean, it's painful, but up until then, of course, we had a really good battle.
To the weather, and tonight's photo of Marion Bay looking towards Maria Island is from Sheena Neal. And you squint hard and you can almost see a cloud way over there. Bushy Park was much warmer than any of the major population centres today, 25 degrees there. Launceston reached 21, Hobart and Strahan both had 20, 17 in Devonport and Burnie. The satellite image shows our clear morning skies with cloud closing in on us ahead of a couple of fronts. The first will clip the state tomorrow afternoon. The second is smaller but should pack a bigger punch, making things a bit colder on Thursday and Friday. Across the country tomorrow, fine in all capitals except Darwin, where there's just a chance of a shower. 30 degrees in Melbourne, Sydney 23, Brisbane and Canberra 28. Back home, it will be mostly fine apart from light showers developing about the west and south late in the morning. A top of 23 degrees in Launceston after a low of 10, 18 for Burnie and Devonport, Strahan and Smithton 21. There's a chance of showers about the east. Oatlands could get up to 4 millimetres, Swansea less than 2, fine and 22 degrees for St Helens. And Hobart has a high chance of showers late tomorrow, a top of 25 after a low of 13. Sunrise tomorrow will be at 7 minutes past 6. On coastal waters, there'll be north to northeasterly winds of 10 to 20 knots, reaching up to 30 knots in most districts before easing and shifting southwesterly. There are strong wind warnings for all coastal waters except across the north. Wednesday, there'll be morning showers about the east, most likely about the northeast, fine otherwise until showers develop about the west in the early afternoon. Thursday, cooler with showers about the west, far south and Bass Strait Islands extending during the day. And Friday should be cool but fine, with a chance of light showers over the weekend. Don't cancel the barbie just yet. And that is this evening's program. Up next is Sarah Ferguson. See you tomorrow.